So I am going to turn over our program to John Gallardo and his good friend and helper, Pam Viggy.
Here to help.
Couldn't have done it without her.
All right.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
No.
Do not ride your bike real fast for a mile or two before you come to stand up in front of a bunch of people. So, nice to see you all here. I had no idea. This weekend is such a busy weekend. So many things going on campus and you name it. So I'm glad to see you all here. I recognize most of your faces. And can I ask, who has been in the Stansbury house before? Most of you. So you'll be correcting my mistakes then, probably. Okay. As you see up on here, and I'm going to read it from here and not try to see up there. Who is Dr. Oscar Stansbury? The life and times. The home he built for Libby, who was his wife. Her name was actually Elizabeth, but since the time she was a little kid, she's been Libby. And he was Oscar, which he hated, so he always put O. Stansbury, which when we were first doing research, that can throw you a little bit sometimes. The construction, architecture, and history of the home, the insider's view, and the Stansbury Home Preservation Association. And if anyone has questions, if you could save them a little bit so that I don't have a senior moment up here.
Don't look at me.
I didn't. As a friend my age said, you have a senior life, so you're going to have senior moments. I mean, it comes with the territory. The Stansbury home is an Italianate Victorian. Most of us call that type of house a Victorian. Victorian is the era when Queen Victoria was alive. In that Victorian era, there were Queen Anne styles, there were Italianate styles, Bidwell Mansion, Italian villa style, and so Richard Macias corrected us that we were using Victorian as the style. So there'll be a test later on all this information. And the lower right is a picture of Dr. Stansbury in 1877 when he was newly married. And, okay. The picture on the left is a drawing, and it's Mrs. Stansbury's grandmother. It's done from a little tiny photograph about 1850. And that early, in a lot of places, you couldn't get a photo this big. They were just starting out. Within a few years, every community, outback Australia or Dakota Plains, little town, had a photographic studio, and they could do pretty much anything. So this is the oldest likeness that we have of anybody. And to the right is cousin George Griffiths, and he is the reason Dr. Stansbury came to Chico. He was a physician in Chico already. He was retiring to run the Parrott Grant, Llano Seco, and retiring from his practice. And he says, come out, Chico's growing. And Dr. Stansbury was from Mississippi and a backwater. And after the Civil War, there was nothing going on much. And so he didn't have much options in that area. Upper right corner, that's another picture of Dr. Stansbury around the time he was married. Okay. And this picture shows Dr. Stansbury in his Knights Templar outfit. You can see the feathers in the cap and the whole thing. And when my mom first saw that picture, she said, he was really duded up. In those days, men had sashes and things just like the women did. And so I'm going to start a new program, not that, another time. Oh, and then, by the way, that picture, we have the sword, which you can see the top of. We have the coat. We have the hat without the feathers. We do not have the sash with the jewelry on it, or the belt, but we have the rest of it. And to the right, a picture of Dr. Stansbury with his favorite horse, Jenny, who had a long life. And we first saw this picture, we thought, that's a giant horse. My gosh. No, it's a regular sized horse. Dr. Stansbury was just a short person. 5'3", I think. Mrs. Stansbury was 4'10", which was taller than Mrs. Bidwell, who was 4'8". And we have Mrs. Stansbury's shoes and a dress, which is shoulders about this high, and the shoes are about this big. And we thought that was kind of unusual. Not so. People were smaller then. You see a photo of General Bidwell with local people, Native American or white people, and he just towers. Of course, he also wore a top hat sometimes, I think, to make him taller yet. But
Do you have a story about Jenny?
a brief story about Jenny. Dr. Stansbury was called to go out in the country at night with no lights on the buggy, of course, except a little thing with a candle in it or something. And the roads were not like now. I don't know how they did it. And it was raining and just everything. And I can't remember the name of the people, but you'd all recognize the name.
I can't remember either. It wasn't called.
You're supposed to be my helper. You're supposed to know everything.
Doing your research.
Yeah.
I'm running the show.
And the horse stopped, and he wouldn't go. So Dr. Stansbury gets out and goes to get the reins and the bridge had washed out. And so if they had gone, they both would have died. And Jenny got extra rations of oats, I think, after that. And the
Let me go back.
Gilder Hospital? No, this one.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
The Gilder Hospital is we believe, was the first hospital in Chico, and Gilder is a family name. Dr. Stansbury's daughter, well, she had two daughters. The younger daughter, her name was Ellen Gilder Stansbury. And throughout history, the Stansburys have used family names as a middle name of the kids. This Gilder Hospital, that's not it.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I understand.
That picture is not the Gilder Hospital.
This is.
That's the Enloe Hospital.
Yes.
The Gilder Hospital was where Jamba Juice is at 2nd and Broadway. Not in that building, though. The same footprint that was a previous building, the Bank of Butte County. And that was torn down in 1930, and then the current building was built as only the 5th Bank of America ever built by them for their bank. Otherwise, they would rent a facility. And so upstairs, he had, for about a year and a half, he had Gilder Hospital, and he had 5 rooms for patients, a kitchen, examination room, and an office. And Chico wasn't quite ready for a hospital yet, I guess, as far as the paying more money than the doctor visit in their own home. And so in fact, Mrs. Stansbury insisted that he stop because they were losing money. And she said, you're a great husband and father and physician, but you're a terrible businessman, so, okay.
And then Enloe didn't come along for a while, right?
And this picture of Enloe Hospital in 1913 was the previous building that burned. So the one that's there is a smaller version of it. And there's an ad we had about that time, and it said, about the hospital, strictly ethical, it said. I'm glad. I think that what that meant was all the physicians involved were accredited, and not just, yeah, I'm a doctor. Okay, and does the arrow show up? Yes. This is in front of, and in the street, dirt street, of the Park Hotel, which was on the northwest corner of Main and 4th. And we don't know that that's all the physicians in town, because it's just written that it's the physicians of Butte County. So
I think that's how many we have now, for the population we have.
okay. The picture on the left, as you may be able to read, is about the time the house was built in 1883. And then to the right is a picture of the back porch, Dr. Stansbury holding his grandson, Middleton Stansbury. And behind the young man is Angeline Stansbury. And to the right is her brother, Middleton Sr., and in front of that is his wife. And we can date it, and it helps us to date the picture, because that latticework door from to the basement is still there. And the porch has been added onto, we know. So when you're trying to date old photos, sometimes you can get within a month or a week or something. Sometimes you're lucky to get within a decade. And I guess I'll let you folks read what's there. But Dr. Stansbury was very, very concerned and involved, coming from Mississippi, where they had malaria and yellow fever and purple fever, all the fevers and all the childhood illnesses. You're all too young to know, but everyone my age had chicken pox, mumps, measles, all that, because there was no shots for it. And
Polio.
And polio, and on and on and on. When it says he investigated prevention of malaria and yellow fever in the Panama Canal, Mr. Earl, who on West 5th Street, it's now a fraternity between Hazel and Ivy on the right, that was the Earl home. No, that was the Eames home, excuse me. The Earl home was on West 3rd and Hazel, the big brick house. And he went with Dr. Stansbury, and they went down to Panama Canal, through the canal area, over to Cuba, to New Orleans and Biloxi, seeing how other places dealt with these terrible diseases, malaria and yellow fever. And the photo of the 3 gentlemen actually is a photo of 5 gentlemen. Dr. Stansbury in front in the easy chair, and to his right and back of him is his son Middleton, and over to the left is his grandson Middleton Jr. And then on the wall in back you can just barely see a painting, and that is the kid is Dr. Stansbury's grandfather, and in back of him is his great-grandfather. And that was painted about 1817, supposedly by one of the Peel family. We're still working on that one. When Libby Stansbury came to Chico in 1877, after she married Dr. Stansbury, he showed her around town and the different churches, and she said, well, where's the Episcopalian church? And he said, we don't have one. So she said, well, my first day here and I already have a project. And so Mrs. Stansbury and Dr. Stansbury were both on the Ladies Auxiliary or the Building Fund or whatever throughout their life on the Episcopalian church. And when you see, I'll go to that one there. Okay, 2 pictures of the same building, but do you notice that the tower is larger, taller on the one on the left than the one on the right? The one on the right is the original spot where the Chico downtown post office is now, and built in 1904. And then in 1912, the federal government made them an offer they couldn't refuse, and paid them handsomely for the spot, but they had to move the church. And so they didn't move the brick tower. When they moved to where it's now St. Augustine of Canterbury Anglican Church, 3rd and Salem, they rebuilt the tower and they made it taller. So that's one of those hints that you sometimes, once you know them, you hold on to them, you can date photos, because if that's in the background of whatever else you're looking at, and you can tell. And the Presbyterian church, that was where the Waterland and Breslau building is now at Broadway and 4th. The Presbyterian church was there till 1909, we believe, and that was torn down, and then they built the current church at 1st and Broadway. I was going somewhere with that.
That was good.
Oh, that church steeple is visible in so many downtown photos. And if it's not there, it's either before the 1870s or it's after 1909. So, and I'm sure your family photos, you folks have used similar, because everyone doesn't write in the back what's...
Or carbon 19.
Pardon?
Nothing. Carbon
Okay.
19.
Yeah. Okay. I'll claim to some of these pictures, but some of them I won't claim to them. This is Dr. Stansbury's marker in the Chico Cemetery, and the entire family is there. And I guess that's a Southern gentleman waiting for his mint julep.
That's a fact.
Yes, when after Mrs. Stansbury died in 1923, and Dr. Stansbury in 1926, and he had a woman coming in cooking and housekeeping, and when she came in to give him his mint julep, he'd already passed on. Okay, this is Miss Stansbury, Angeline Stansbury, the older daughter, and she taught art at Chico High School from 1907, we believe, to 1950. Reminds me of the Spanish teacher I had in high school had taught my dad. So some of those teachers just were there forever. It's Miss Stansbury, Angeline Stansbury, that we have to thank for the Stansbury House still being where it is and not having been modernized. I guess almost everybody's been there. The old wallpapers, the Lincrusta wainscoting, all of that is original, and she liked that place, and so she was not about to change it. And the family has kept that idea going.
Let's see who they are.
The arrow pointed to Angeline. She's the middle child, and then sitting the son, Middleton Pemberton Stansbury. I'd just like to have that to carry around. Not Bill Smith or Tom Jones or me or whatever, but and then on the far right is Ellen, the youngest daughter, and so okay. The architectural details, and also, did you go past that or?
No, we're still.
Oh, okay.
This is just
The quarter block that the property has, fortunately, they didn't sell the next to the house and have a big apartment building there, parking lot or something, because the big lawn and everything, I think, adds to the house. A.A. Cook and Sacramento architect designed it, and A.J. Bryan, who was a local contractor and did architectural work, he designed the old city hall and built it. Just so many things in Chico, houses and commercial structures. And we have separate listings for how much it cost, and it was just about $8,000 for the home and $1,000 for the lot. And the Stansbury saved everything. So we have the bill for the stained glass window, which was $35, including shipping from Baltimore to Chico. We have the bill for the Iceman for July of 1911, which was 2,200 pounds of ice for $2.10. So besides, and as a research information, it's just fun to look at that kind of stuff and you go, wow. And that the plaque there is states that this house has been placed on the National Register of Historic Places. And Miss Stansbury had signed that application and then passed away, and it was finished. This is just a little bit of architectural detail that you don't see when you look at the whole house. There's lots of it. And this is the Capitol on top of one of the columns of the front porch, and it's in the Corinthian style, which most Italianate architectural structures use. Now, on top of the house is a wrought iron fencing. It's not a widow's walk, because to get up to there, you'd have to go out a window on the second floor and go up on a ladder, climb up, and then go down with a trap door. So that's not, and there's two chimneys, which I will show in detail on one of them. And I don't know if you've ever seen that. I'd never paid much attention to designs on chimneys before, but this is a quite common usage for centuries. And on the left you see that basically same design. It looks like an upside down tuning fork. And the reason for that design is to help keep evil spirits from being able to come down your chimney to get into your house. And the picture on the left that's the oldest house on Nantucket Island, Massachusetts, built in 1686, and it has that same design. I've seen that before. This picture I really like. It's in front of the Stansbury house, and there's a trench off on the left, in the left corner. That's not a trench. The glass negative was broken off. Is why. And this is after 1911, because in 1911 Main and Broadway were both paved for the first time. Before that they were dirt streets. And so exactly when, we're not sure. And we were told that it was a Chinese funeral. Well, we've talked to several Chinese American people, and they said, no, you can tell by what they're wearing and whatever, and what they're carrying, that this is a celebration, but not a funeral. And about between the house and the far left, there's a tall, round thing with a little point. We thought that was a tower across the street. That's a
Flag.
thing that somebody's carrying with real light wood and tissue or silk or something.
Do you want to tell them about the new and old Chinatown a little bit?
Oh, the reason it's going down Fifth. Fifth was a very important street because it came from the train station to downtown. That's where the circus would come into town, and then go back, and then go over to the locals call it a different name. It's where the zoo student housing is now. I hate to use that term, but that's where the circuses usually were. Doing is going from old Chinatown to new Chinatown, because that's the way they're heading. And for those of you that might not be aware, Chico had eventually 2 Chinatowns. The first Chinatown was started in the 1860s, we believe. Finding information is difficult because a lot of it was not published in regular papers. Some of the things, like one, when they had the grand opening of the Chinese Joss House in New Chinatown, huge write-up, very sympathetic, not derogatory at all, a very glowing report of this facility. Old Chinatown was on Flume Street between 5th and 6th on both sides of the street. And in the other room there is a large blow-up of a called aerial view, bird's eye view map. And you can see in that the Chinatown, it's on the edge of town. Well, as the town grew, you couldn't build your Chinese house or store, whatever you wanted. It had to be away from the rest of the people, because most people didn't want to be near them. And so Bidwell and some of the Chinese representatives went south of the train station, and it's between Orange and Cherry, 7th and 8th. And it was on, they had like an alley, we'd call it, in the middle of the block, and the structures pointed into that. Whereas over here, they pointed to the streets. And so this gave them a little buffer. This is one of our docents. If any of you are ever interested in being a docent, please contact us, me, and
Here's a little schedule for tours.
oh yes, tours are Saturdays and Sundays at 1, 2, and 3 o'clock. And I'll be running from here over to there for the 1, 2, and 3 o'clock today. This is a picture of the sitting room or living room, depending on who you talk to, as far as the name. And the person who took these pictures used the same lens and camera that they use for realty, where it shows the rooms real big and your yard real wide, you know, and it's not quite so much. But anyway, upper left corner is Dr. Oscar and Mrs. Libby Stansbury. And these were, well, they're about this big. They were from little tiny pictures. This was in their golden years, as my mom referred to them. To the right, that picture is in the master bedroom, which has its own marble fireplace at Christmas time. And the left lower picture is a Atwater Kent radio. And it's about 1920, although we've not got a real crystal clear on that. And the speaker on top has a cord connected to the back, and you can put it over, if you're sitting over here and the radio's here and everybody's gone to sleep, or you're hard of hearing, whatever, so you can carry the speaker around. And all those dials, it's not user friendly. And besides plugging it in and having an aerial wire running, you had to have another wire going to a cold water pipe to ground it. We didn't know that. You had to ground it also. So we were getting a okay. This is probably the oldest and most valuable thing that we have in the house. And by the way, the city of Chico owns the house and everything in it. The Stansbury Home Preservation Association, of which I'm a member on the board, we operate it for the city. Similar to the Chico Museum, where the city owns the building and I believe will repair the roof or the plumbing and that kind of stuff sometimes. But they're not involved in the day-to-day operation. That's as long, Orville does it differently. Whatever works in a community, they feel comfortable and save it and open to the public. That's just fine. I'm sorry?
Explain what that is.
Oh, this is a quilt, and it was made between 1815 and 1830. And when we first saw it, well, actually the material itself was woven at home in Eastern Shore, Maryland. And the color material, the flowers and all that, was cut out of English chintz. And they put some wool from their sheep in there to puff it up a bit. And if you look carefully and shine a little flashlight by it, it's puffed up a little bit still, but 200 and something years, kind of.
Deflated.
Pardon?
Deflated.
Yeah. That quilt, I don't want to say go see it now because we're going to put it away, but we have to be very, very careful. We have unbleached muslin that has had no soap or anything in it, and we lay it on there in pieces because I don't care how careful you are pulling something, you're going to be dragging on it, and on and off, on and off. That's just 1 week, and it was never used. It was brought out on special occasions, family get-togethers and such. That's why. And the dyes are natural dyes, so it can't be cleaned, they said. The background is not colored at all, it's natural color, but the flowers and any of that, they said, do not let, this is from the State Preservation Office and the National Trust. And the woman the expert who took photos of it and wrote to her, she's the West Coast expert on antique quilts, and she sent copies of the picture without no description to her cohorts at Williamsburg and at Winterthur, the DuPont estate in Delaware. And they were amazed at how vibrant the colors were and everything because it was kept folded inside out in this closet. Okay. The picture of the stove, okay. Don't lean against this. The stove, the family says that they believe it's the original stove. I'm going to have to write to the company, Montague, which still makes ranges, because online I've not been able to find what year that stove was made. How are we doing for now?
We're going okay.
Okay. Oh, it's a wood-burning stove, and going up to the very ceiling, there's a round, dark metal item. That's a hot water heater. And to the right, hanging on the wall, is a hot water tank. The stove, in the wood firebox are pipes, and in the furnace in the basement, there are water pipes. So if you were cooking in those big old cast iron stoves, once you got them hot, they stayed hot for a long time. Or you had the furnace going, you probably had all the hot water you needed. So that other one up there, you opened it up, turned the gas on, lit it, closed it up, and told everyone in the house that you had done that. Because there's no thermostat, pressure or temperature safety relief valve. No. So theoretically, you could, blow off half the house if it turned into boiling.
Is that when everyone took a bath?
No. This is the doctor's office. For 40 years of his practice, this was basically what you got if you came to the house. If he came to your house, he would have a bag.
Let me go back. Let me go back.
There's a door to the right, you can just barely see it. The public could come in from the side porch and not come through the house. In the Midwest especially, there's still lots of doctors and dentists, optometrists that have their office in their home. And the younger people think that's very strange.
Not strange. Oops.
Dr. Frankenstein, is he in the house here? This is Dr. Stansbury's first X-ray machine. And I believe it's dated 1905, which is very, very early. You plugged it in, and it's hard to see, but that colored sparking, it went between these, and you adjusted them to get a certain color and certain form. And then you got the patient closer to it, and they knew to keep the film in a lead-lined pouch, otherwise it could get exposed, and then put it wherever they needed to try to look at that person, and then turned it off. All during that time, everybody in that area, in the room and the next room, was being x-rayed. And if you were a doctor or a nurse that did very many x-rays, that's one of the earliest x-ray machines in Northern California.
Wow.
In the entry hall, when you come in the front door, you're greeted with Mercury or Hermes, depending on if you want to use the Greek or Roman term. And that was gas originally. And when the house was electrified, they ran wire up that gas tubing and made it electric. The stained glass window is as you're going up the stairway, and we'd have just the one, but it's our favorite. And it was purchased in Baltimore for $35 the year the house was built. Where it says original architectural details, that's in Ellen's front bedroom. And those were hand painted about 1900. The story in the family is that it was supposed to have been all the way around the ceiling, and the artist asked to be paid for what he had already done, and they paid him and they never saw him again. So it's really not complete, according to what the family said they wanted. The bathroom is actually a 1926 remodel. The tub is the original. People expect to see a tank up on the wall with the pull chain. That was replaced by the tank and the toilet that you see beyond there. And then the sink was from that 20s time also. And the woodwork and that doorway there, the whole house is pine. All the woodwork has been grained to look like, depends on who you talk to, either mahogany or walnut, and then varnished over, and most of that is in excellent condition. One of the grandsons, in fact it was Middleton Stansbury Jr., he said that when they visited, you either had your hands in your pockets or visible here or invisible there. That's, in fact, some of the little children's books in the locked glass case upstairs in the alcove library. If you wanted to look at one and an adult was available, they would sit you down, get the book out. You never touched the book. They showed it to you. I mean, I don't know about your kids' books if you have any. Sorry. In fact, my mom had saved and tied up and put it in a box with a message on it. These were my and my brother's comic books. There isn't a single cover. They're useless, really. I mean, they're fun to look at, but they have no value because, you know, like Antique Roadshow, you want to have the box, the toy came in, and etc. So anyway, this picture is Angelin's bedroom, and it's trying to approximate what it was like when she lived there. We have several black and white photos. And the dressing table with the mirror on the right was given back to us about 10 years ago by one of the great-granddaughters that lives in Sacramento. And she said, and she also gave us a secretary desk that had both been in that room. And on the table is, on the right, is a small painting of flowers. And that was done by Angela Stansbury when she was 12. And when we first saw it, we thought, well, 12-year-old didn't do that. And we got some experts that knew what they were talking about saying, yes, that's possible. And the black and white photo there is Mrs. Stansbury. And we just recently realized that we have that dress, so we put it on a dress form. And her shoulder's about this tall.
Go a little faster.
Okay. The picture is of the Christmas tree, which we have up every Christmas. And that's really our main event, because it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And the ice cream social, this year we tried it in May, which, instead of August. It didn't work out quite so well, the timing. But we encourage you to participate and come. They're all old-fashioned. We tried to be as authentic in decoration as possible, the music, etc. And last night was the Art and Wine Walk, downtown Chico. We had hundreds of people come through the house, and they served apple cider there. Hard cider, but apple cider. That makes it better and okay, right?
First timers, a lot of first timers. Never been to the house. Last night we had a lot of first timers.
Yes, majority of the people that came through had never been in the house before. And we had no idea what the turnout was going to be like or what. And so we were so glad that so many more people in Chico got to see it. And I told them to come back during the day when the light's better. And
now this is the part that John doesn't like to talk about, being called the caretaker, which your programs and the announcement said that John was caretaker for 20 years. Because there's a connotation there that there's a creepy caretaker.
who is this?
And he will tell you what his title was. But also the idea that's an old house and are there ghosts, and John's had to handle that question several times when he lived at the house.
Several?
And those are just myths. And John will tell you now a little about his experience living in the house for 20 years.
I lived there for 20 years, and you'd think I would have seen, heard, felt something. And people say, well, you're just not receptive. Okay, I'm not receptive, but as far as there's no ghosts as far as I'm concerned, so that's where I will go.
And what is your title?
My
John?
title was resident curator. Right, Keith?
I'm sure there might be questions about, where John slept, where John bathed. That's all kind of interesting, don't you think?
How'd you get in here?
A little comic relief.
The House at 5th and Salem is a book that we sell at the house. And a grandson, Bob Clough. It's C-L-O-U-G-H, and it's pronounced Clough. Could be Clough, Clove, whatever, but it's Clough. And it tells, besides the history of the family, back east and here, and the house, it talks about Chico, the 1870s and 80s. So it's a nice little book. I do also have a crunched up ad for our Victorian Christmas that we're going to have. And I do have one for everybody, if you would like, handout about the house that tells more about it. And like I said, every Saturday and Sunday at 1, 2, and 3 o'clock, unless it's a major holiday. And then we are looking for docents to learn and help out. And the Chico History Museum has been very helpful. And I'm also on the board of Chico Heritage Association. Besides the Stansbury Association, we're trying to work together because we're all in the same business, restoring, preserving, educating, etc. And I see Dave and Betty and Chris.
Randy and
And Debbie, senior moment again. And the others that help here. And we invite everybody to the Chico Heritage Office in the Garden Walk Mall. It's towards the back, towards Zot's Hot Dogs. And
This is where you clap.
this is why she wouldn't show me the end of it. It's just, oh, you'll like it, you'll like it.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for helping.
You're welcome.
She did it mainly. And I thank you all for coming. Thank you.
A couple questions. Well, is there a living curator now?
No. We have, they modernized alarm systems and all that. In fact, there's, I don't know how many cameras motion activated, that when they're activated, our President Dino Corbin gets a thing on his phone. He looks and sees a family of raccoons. And now, to show how much they have improved and changed the systems, if the power goes out to the house, there's a 48-hour battery backup, automatic, and the police and fire are automatically aroused. And the raccoon family is really interesting. They come and visit almost every night. And 2 nights ago, they dug in the lawn, a big area. We thought a bunch of cattle had gotten in there. And I mean, the turf was turned up and whatever, looking for night crawlers. I'm not sure, but they made a mess of the lawn. And so, yes.
John, where did you bathe?
Next question. Yes.
Is there a resident curator now, a different person?
No.
I'm sorry?
Is there a different person there now as the resident?
No one lives on the property now. No. There's, in back of the house, and I thought I had a photo of it, but I obviously didn't, is a 2-story building that we built to replicate the barn carriage house that was there. And upstairs is a 2-bedroom apartment. But because the storage area on the property was a couple closets under beds in the basement, which is not a good place to store fabric, leather, glue on the binding of books, that kind of thing. And so there may be a time when there's somebody living in that, and the downstairs is a kitchen and bathroom and storage area and display area. We're just kind of move along as we go. Somebody else said, yes?
Where is the quilt? What room is the quilt in, and why is it going to be put away for Christmas, or?
Oh, it's in Angeline's bedroom, on the bed.
It is?
Yeah, it looks different in the picture, doesn't it? Yeah, first of all, it's... I won't be invited back, will I? It's laid out flat, so you can see the whole thing, whereas on the bed, it shows part of it. No, we don't want any more wear to happen to it. Not that it's had wear, but we have to be very careful. That old. Some fabrics, in fact, Carol, you donated a old, beautiful dress that you used to wear at Christmas time and events, and the fabric was really sturdy. And then, I don't know if you sneezed or something, and and so you donated it to the house. But some fabrics, you look at them and you, whoops, and you can't tell unless you have an expert do that. Yeah.
When was the house electrified, and when they did it, did they surface mount conduit, or were they able to fish it up where it wasn't seen?
We don't have the exact date yet. In the Merriam Library is the Stansbury collection of receipts and you have like the Iceman's bill and just all kinds of stuff. And we're sure that it's in there. It's going to take a lot of research in all that material to find. And what was the second part of the question?
Did they surface mount the conduit, or were they?
No, it's in fact the oldest outlet that we know of is in the parlor, and it's round, and it has two slots like this instead of what we're used to on the old ones. And of course, they went to Collier Hardware and got an adapter to plug it. It's a little piece of wire with, you know, but.
What is the current valuation of the property now?
I think the last one I saw was like 1.1 million, because it's a C1 zone, which means you can build practically anything on there, and it's just about a quarter of a block, and there was nothing on it except wood piles for wood for sale when they bought it to build the house. And for Dr. Stansbury, it's, you know, it's just a block to Broadway and a couple blocks to his office, and so it was highly valued. And there's a misconception, I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but that Mrs. Stansbury didn't like that location because she thought it was too far out of town. That's not what she said. Dr. Stansbury was looking out on property by the Moorheads on River Road. And that's what because the family said, no, that's not right. The family said that that was too far out of town. He agreed for him to, you know, patients wouldn't come and whatever. So now, did you ask when electricity came in? Did I hear you? We're not exactly sure. About 1900. 1900 is when the Centerville Powerhouse was put on. That's Butte Creek, I guess, isn't it? Yes. Yeah. And from then on, electricity was very reliable. Before that, there was a steam generator generating a turbine for electric power, and it was several private companies that didn't pan out too well. People, you know, changing over, and you've got gas lights, you know, so we'll stick with that. But we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3 light fixtures, ceiling fixtures that are gas and electric originally. There's no gas to them now, but that was when electricity first came in, and the family said, and several other pioneer families have agreed, that when the parents would go to usually pull chain light or turn light, no electricity tonight. There was something wrong with but once it became hydroelectric, it was really reliable.
John, I'd like to mention that dress. I don't know the original owner of the dress, and it had the leg of muffin sleeves. It was dark, it was black with little purple lines and dots in it, and it was 2 pieces, and it was very, very heavy. And I probably wore it about 5 times, but every time I would put it on, I noticed when I got it, it was worn at the waist. It had been repaired, and at that time, people had their best, you know, sending to going, and then the work. This dress had been loved and worn so many times, and I just wished I knew the occasions and the person. You know, it is a fabulous piece.
As they would say, go ahead.
It's on display in Ellen's room. And last night we had so many young people. It was really neat coming through the house for the first time. And a lot of those young women went right over to your dress and admired it.
It is.
Yeah.
As they would say on
Stories. I wish we had them.
on Antique Roadshow, they would say this dress was well loved.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the tricycle that we have, that was given to us, metal wheels, all metal, and a horse's head. Hardly any paint left. That is the epitome of well loved. Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions?
Do people have to sign up ahead of time for the tours, or do they?
Like I said, they're given at 1, 2, and 3 o'clock.
How much is the fee to do
I'm sorry?
How much is
How
the
much?
fee?
Oh, $5 for adults, $3 for age 6 to 12, and under 6 free. We try to keep about the same as Bidwell Mansion.
Is it obvious where you go, like when the tours are happening, are the gates open? Or where do you go?
Front gate is right.
Well, the front gate is open for the tours. Yeah.
John, did you mention, you know, that one of the students of Angeline was Jackson Pollock? Was it the brother or child?
No, Charles Pollock,
Okay.
Jackson Pollock's brother, and we had last night a bunch of his work on display. He's in the last 20, 25 years has become known in and of his own work. Because 30, 40 years ago you ask about Charles Pollock and then people don't know what you're talking about. And he had a romantic inclination towards Hester Patrick. And I think he more than she, he kept sending her cards and like postcards with doodles on it, and all his writing material would have pictures of people in that. And the Caduceus, the Chico High School yearbook, several issues, they asked him to do all the designs and drawings. So, but he stayed here a little bit longer than the rest of the family, which bought the Jonesville Hotel and moved up there. And then after a couple years of that being a disaster, they moved from the area. But any other questions? How about some answers from the audience here? Come on. No, actually, when people go through, we learn from people going through, like the mayonnaise maker that's a plunger. A couple who lived in the outback of Alaska, 100 miles from the nearest person, said, "That's a mayonnaise maker. I'll show you how it works." Great program.